we're going to go down and we're going to torque a number of different fasteners in a number of different ways so you can see the difference. So I'm just going to describe each one really quickly and then we'll go from there. Hey guys, welcome back to the JPM Performance channel. Today we're going to talk about fasteners. Nuts, lock washers, nylocks, jet nuts, and Loctite. What's the difference? What works the best? And which application would you use each one in? So let's get into it. I'll show you what we got going on. Okay, so what I've done here is I've taken a regular steel plate. This is about 3/16 thick. And I have simply tack welded a bunch of 5/16 bolts onto the back of it. And this is kind of what we're going to use as our test bed. So I'm just going to clamp it down in the vise here. So you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different bolts. I had flat, just regular nuts on each one, snugged up when I welded them on the back so that they're each flush and square to the plate, so we know that all of the bolts coming through are straight. And so here's what I thought we'd do. We're going to go down and we're going to torque a number of different fasteners in a number of different ways so you can see the difference. So I'm just going to describe each one really quickly and then we'll go from there. So these are all 5/16 fine thread. Our first one is simply a regular nut. Grade 5, nothing special nut. We'll stick that one on there. Our next one is a grade 5 nut and a standard steel lock washer, like everybody knows about. Roll that one on there. Our third one is a combination of a flat washer and a lock washer and then a regular nut as well. Why would you use a flat washer? The reason that you would use a flat washer would be to spread the load. On some materials that are thinner, whether it's aluminum or whether it's, oh look at that, that's a coarse nut. Total failure. If it's aluminum or if it's fiberglass or Lexan, you can use a flat washer to spread the load, because what a lock washer will do is bite into that material, and you wouldn't necessarily want to bite into aluminum or fiberglass or carbon fiber or carbon Kevlar or whatever. Okay, next we're going to continue our theme with a flat washer, but this time we are going to use a nylock. What's a nylock? You can see that it has a nylon insert in there that is unused, and so they put this top around these nuts with a little nylon insert, and I cannot spin this down. When it gets to the nylon insert, I'm stuck. So I'm going to have to put this down with a ratchet. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The next one is what's called a jet nut. What is a jet nut? Well, it's much more prevalent in the aircraft industry. This particular nut has a flange built into it and also utilizes a smaller socket to install it. But the reason it's a jet nut is because it's been crimped on both sides. This is actually an AN washer. The difference between a standard washer and an AN washer is that an AN washer fits much more snugly around the bolt, whereas an SAE washer has a lot more play. These are more like what you would see in a race car. So once again, I get down to a certain point and I can't spin that down by hand. Okay, our next two that we're going to do are both going to be flat washers, but now we're going to use some Loctite. What is Loctite? Loctite is a fluid that, when applied to some threads, you can see the little picture on the front, between the bolt and the nut, this fluid will dry and it will prevent the nut from moving somewhat. Now there are a multitude of different Loctites. These are the two that I basically use. 242 blue and 262 red. So what we're going to start with is just one little drop of blue down here where the nut is going to be. And one thing about Loctite, make sure that as soon as you put the Loctite on, you essentially torque it down right away. So we are going to torque all of these at 20 foot-pounds. So we'll go ahead and torque the blue Loctite one. 20 foot-pounds, exactly. This is what we're going to be torquing all of these at. The next one we're going to do is going to be just a drop of red Loctite. Same amount as the blue, down at the bottom. If I can get the nut on, that would be helpful. Okay, those two are torqued. Haven't torqued the rest of them yet. Because this is a liquid, and as soon as it gets in between these threads, it's going to start to dry. So when you use it, make sure you tighten that bolt up right away. Okay, the last one that we're going to do here is going to be what I consider the end-all of end-alls. If you never want something to come loose, you'll use a combination of all of these things. And actually, super, super rare that I would ever do this. Just going to do it as a demonstration. So we've got a flat washer, a lock washer, and a jet nut. Plus, I'm going to put a drop of red Loctite on the plate before the flat washer. Then the lock washer. Whoops. These things are pretty small, they're easy to get away from you. But this time, I'm going to put Loctite, red Loctite, all the way around here. Once again, 20 foot-pounds. Okay. Now you can see that the Loctite has squished out. We'll just wipe that off a little bit. Like I was saying, this is not normally something that I would do, but you'll see why I did it for you guys on this demonstration. So let's go ahead and torque the rest of these down. The jet nut and the nylock, I have to use the gun. But what do you notice about that? The nylock actually was harder to get down than the jet nut. But we'll see which one stays the tightest. So now all we have to do is we'll go through and we'll torque the rest of these. You can see how many more turns it takes to get the lock washer crushed down. And finally, just the nut. Okay. Now, how long does it take for Loctite to dry? That would be the next question. I'm sure that it says on the back of these bottles, if you could read it. My bottles are so old that it's kind of worn off. I just keep refilling these with larger ones. I would suggest if you're going to put this into the field or out on the racetrack right away, you need to give the Loctite 2 to 3 hours to dry properly so that it's all the way set up, kind of like an epoxy, and that's what will happen. So we are going to leave this plate sitting right here for the next 3 hours, and we'll come back to it and we will start untorquing these. This torque wrench I can turn backwards and it will tell me how much force it takes to back these off. So stay tuned. I'll be right back.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
All right, guys, it has been 3 hours. The Loctite should be all set up. So what we're going to do here is we're going to break these loose starting down here with our nothing but a nut. And we'll see how many foot-pounds it takes to break everything loose and spin them off. Okay, that one popped at minus 20.7. So that's about exactly what it took to torque it down. Here's the problem. I can spin this right off. So in racing application, vibration, being on the track, harmonics, this obviously is not going to work. That's not going to last. Next is the same style nut with just a lock washer. Only 16.1 foot-pounds to break that loose. Why is that? That is because this washer is not completely flat. It is trying to dig into this material to prevent it from breaking loose. However, as you can see, it didn't take all that much to break it loose. Now, one thing that you did see was once I had it broken loose, I had to continue a couple of turns to get it to come completely off. So that is a good thing. Even because it only took 16 foot-pounds, if it did break loose, it's not going to come off. It's going to take 2 turns before it spins off like this one did. Okay. Next is a regular nut, lock washer, and a flat washer. One, two, and then I can spin it. Only 15 foot-pounds. Here's the reason that is. The lock washer wants to bite into the material that it's holding down. When you have a flat washer, the lock washer is attempting to bite into here, not into the material that you're holding on to. So generally, this is not what I would use. Generally, I would prefer to have just a lock washer, especially into steel, like this one. It will bite harder, and it will, once it breaks loose, it will come off the same as this. This does spread the load, like I mentioned, and you can get wider flat washers depending on your material to support to support the material so it doesn't bite in. It's kind of a must. You really can only use a lock washer like this into steel, maybe some thick aluminum, but if we had aluminum, you would see that this would leave a big gouge because of the edge. So that's not necessarily ideal either. So currently, I like this one the best. Next is our nylock with a flat washer. Well, Obviously, I'm going to have to rotate this all the way off. But you can see it took 16 foot-pounds, similar to what the first one did. So why is that? Why didn't it bite harder? Why did it bite harder than this? It's because of the nylon. I'm going to have to literally unscrew this with a ratchet all the way up to the top to get this to come off. So even though this loosens up, even if it does loosen up, this nut will essentially never come off. So that is a preferred method for holding something down. Now let's switch over to the jet nut and see what kind of pressure it holds. Once again, only 14 foot-pounds. Very, very similar to what we were seeing with the flat washer. So, but the advantage of a jet nut is, just like the nylock, I'm going to have to rotate this all the way off. So even though it breaks loose, it is still going to stay on the bolt. Now, the most important thing here to take from a lot of this is that proper torque is the key. You know, these are only 5/16 grade 5 bolts. They're not designed to really take much more than about 18 to 20 foot-pounds. We're stretching them here a little bit at 20. But every fastener stretches when you tighten this down. If you've watched my video on stretching rod bolts, if you haven't, please do, you'll see that what happens is as you tighten this nut down, the bolt or fastener actually stretches out and gives you that extra torque. So let's move on to the Loctite. So all we have here is a flat nut, regular nut, onto a flat washer with 1 drop of blue Loctite. $16 foot-pounds, right? Breakaway is about the same as all the way at the beginning. Here's the difference. That Loctite is acting like a lock washer. I can't spin this off. I'm going to have to get past the blue Loctite before I can actually turn this off. I can barely turn it off with my hand. So the blue Loctite is representative of maybe a lock washer or maybe even a nylock. But once again, because all we had was a flat washer, it still only took that 16 foot-pounds to pull that off. Now, let's move on to red. $16 foot-pounds, breakaway. So what is this telling us here? It's telling us that no matter what you use for a fastener, the breakaway is all about the same initially. What we don't want to have happen is it to break away and then spin completely off like this one will. This will obviously just spin right off once it's taken up. So you need to use some sort of a locking mechanism. Once again, this red, I will have to back off and back off and back off. Now, if you really want to hold it more firmly, what you really have to do is you have to go all the way and you have to use a little bit more. I really only use red on things that I never want to come loose. So this is a jet nut and a lock washer and a good amount of red Loctite. Okay, so here's what you're going to notice here. It's only 16 foot-pounds, but it's continuously requiring almost 8 foot-pounds to continue to back this off. So once again, our clamping force is still about the same as our very first one, but this will not come off. And odds of it coming all the way off are slim to none. And it's continuously taking much more to get this nut off of here. Now, in the real world, I would never use a jet nut and a lock washer and a flat washer. If I'm using a jet nut, I will use a proper AN washer here. If I'm using a nylock, I will use generally an SAE washer like this to spread the load, or a larger fender washer. But it just goes to show you that Loctites and locking mechanisms don't necessarily mean that it's going to take so much more to break every one of these loose. As you could see, it took about the same amount of torque to break everything loose. There's a lot of misconception out there about what you should use, when you should use it. This is probably the only one that I would never use. Obviously, that's not going to last in any kind of a racing condition at all. It will break loose, and as soon as it breaks loose, it will come off. Generally, in a racing application, I will use either a nylock or a jet nut, depending on its location. For suspension bolts, like in a Heim joint situation, a jet nut and a washer is completely fine if you torque it to the right spec. So hopefully this has opened up your guys' eyes a little bit as to what actually is going on when you're using Loctite and lock washers. So I still suggest you use something. As you can see, I can't turn any of these off with my fingers. Once these are broken loose here, all three of these, they will come off. So kind of an interesting tidbit. The most important thing here is obviously your torque values. You can find torque values for almost anything, whether it's engine building, suspension building. It's generally rated on the size of fastener, and you'll get a torque rating or a stretch rating if you're doing rod bolts as well. So I appreciate you guys watching today. Hope this has been a little interesting for you. I certainly enjoy doing these videos, and this is one I've been wanting to do for a while, and just gives you an idea of what you should use, what kind of fastener, and where you should use it. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, and I'm betting there's going to be some on this one, hit me up below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.